We all love playing D&D 5e, but if you're anything like Midjourney, you go, what the heck is a whip? I don't understand it. Does the handle attach to the rest of it? Let's build a character that can use a whip. A fighter, right off the bat, has access to martial weapon proficiency skill. The main way they're going to utilize that whip is through two weapon fighting, the special rule that allows a bonus action on an offhand attack. This fighter's going to take the dual wielding feat, which is going to get around the light weapon requirement for two weapon fighting. This allows them to use a whip in one hand and another weapon in the other. Could be a whip, but I'd recommend something like a longsword. That'll be your damage dealer. It's easy to compare something like damage, a d4 to a d8, whip versus a longsword. It's not even a question. The longsword is just twice as good, period. But how do you compare reach? How much better is a 10-foot reach than a 5-foot reach? It's not hard to quantify. Your 5-foot reach will let you threaten up to 8 adjacent spaces on a D&D combat map. 10-foot reach adds 16 to that. Doesn't add 8, it adds 16. It's not twice as good, it's 3 times better. Instead of 8 spaces threatened, you get a total of 24 threatened spaces. That's serious control, and ultimately it's letting you project your character's abilities across the combat map a lot more, 3 times more. So if that's the case, the whip is appropriate for a character build that needs to project their abilities. So that's it. That's why you'd use a whip. The fact that the whip's reach allows you to get opportunity attacks on creatures up to 10 feet away means that when this creature moves away from you, you get an opportunity attack. But when this creature moves away from you, you also get an opportunity attack. For fighting style, I wouldn't take two-weapon fighting. I'd take defense. While you're wearing armor, you get a +1 bonus to AC. This is going to make this fighter essentially be able to replace a shield. That +2 AC from a shield isn't going to be necessary here. They're going to get that +1 to AC from defense, and the other +1 to AC is going to come from taking the dual wielder feat. Now, if they're a variant human, they can get that at level 1 if the DM allows. Otherwise, that first ASI coming at level 4 is going to unlock that feat for them. Bottom line is dual wielder feat allows you to master fighting with 2 weapons. You gain the following benefits. +1 bonus to AC while you're wielding a separate melee weapon in each hand. So in this case, a whip and a whip, or maybe a longsword and a whip. You can use 2-weapon fighting even when the one-handed melee weapons you're wielding aren't light. That's right. That means the whip can be used in the offhand. It's not really there so that your bonus action 2-weapon fighting option deals a lot of damage. It'll do a little damage, but it's going to allow you to project your character build's abilities out up to 10 feet away or more. Finally, the dual wielder option allows the ability to draw and store 2 weapons when you'd normally be able to only draw or store 1. So you get that free object interaction every action. So rather than having to whip out a short sword on one turn and a whip on another, you can just put them both away, take them both out on any given turn. This also allows you to switch up the weapons. You could play a fighter that has 2 whips and a longsword, or carries, heck, 2 longswords and 2 whips. And then you can, turn by turn, alternate those out in any combination you need. If your fighters is in melee, locked in with the BBEG and just needs to deal damage, fine. Draw 2 longswords, go to town. Or if you're in a position where you want to be able to project your reach out, threaten attacks of opportunity, pop on 2 whips. And now each of those are going to be able to attack as both an attack action and a bonus action using that 2-weapon fighting option. Beyond which here, because you took the fighting style defensive and you took the dual wielder feat, depending on whether you got that feat at 1st level or 4th level through your ASI, you have a +2 bonus to your AC provided you're wearing armor, which let's hope you are, and you're using a melee weapon in each hand. No need for a shield here. Now you might be thinking, why on earth would I want to give up the 2-weapon fighting style give up the +3, 4, or 5 I might be getting with my strength or dex bonus off that finesse weapon, such as a whip? Well, because we're not trying to deal a lot of damage with the whip. We're trying to project character abilities, such as, for example, sneak attack from a rogue. If you got a rogue who has the ability to use a whip, either through gaining martial proficiencies or whose DM allows them to train on a whip. Maybe you find a manual of whipping. Given all that, let's look at the breakdown. Fighting style, you're going to want to take defensive or maybe 2-weapon fighting, if that's your thing. At 3rd level, martial archetype, take Battle Master. The whole point of Battle Master is having a series of maneuvers that you want to afflict your enemies with. Well, the whip is where it's at with this. Now you might be saying, well, why wouldn't I just, use a polearm, use a halberd? It's got reach. Well, most of the maneuvers require you to score a hit on an enemy. By using the 2-weapon fighting option, you as a fighter are going to be able to attack once, twice, 3, 4 times, depending on what level your fighter is. But at all levels, if you're using that 2-weapon fighting option, you can utilize your bonus action to make another attack and thus give you another chance to inflict a maneuver on your target. And that's really the name of the game for this build. By the time you've gotten 4th level, you've either taken the dual wielder feat or you've taken an ability score improvement. I would recommend trying to get your dex or your strength, depending on the build you're going for, from 3 to 4 to 5 as quickly as possible. Now, using a standard array, your strength or dexterity is going to be maxed at a 17 to start with. You're going to maybe use your 15 and then take a player species that has a +2 to strength or dex, putting you at 17, putting you to +3. At this first ability score improvement, though, you're going to be able to push that up to a 19 at a +4. This matters because a Battle Master's maneuvers have a maneuver save DC of 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your strength or dex modifier, your choice. Interestingly, by the time you get to 6th level, your second ability score improvement can push your dex or strength to a 20, thus giving your maneuver save DC an 8 plus that 5 from the strength or dex bonus, giving you a grand total of a maneuver save DC of 16 by level 6. Wizards, sorcerers, warlocks, no one else is going to have that. All the other classes in the game are going to have to wait till 8th level to push their wisdom, charisma, or an intelligence score to a 20 to get that +5. So ultimately, a Battle Master fighter is going to have the highest save DC for their special abilities of anyone by 6th level in the game. At 5th level, your fighter is going to get a second attack. So if they're using, say, a longsword in their main hand, they can attack once, then twice with that longsword, dealing 1d8 plus 4, 1d8 plus 4 damage, and then every turn making that bonus attack with the whip, which might only be sitting at a d4, but it might be at a d4 plus 4 if you decided to go with the 2-weapon fighting style. Your choice at this point. But ultimately, that's a lot of dice you're rolling every single turn. That's without even using maneuvers and burning through superiority dice. An important thing to remember about using the 2-weapon fighting bonus option in the combat rules is that it states when you make an attack with one weapon, you may use a different weapon to make that bonus attack. Well, guess what? If you have a whip in one hand and a longsword in the other hand, you can choose which is the primary and the secondary weapon from turn to turn. That's right, you can alternate. You don't even have to switch hands. You can make 2 attacks with your whip and then a bonus action attack with your longsword, or you can make 2 attacks with your longsword and a bonus action attack with your whip. And you can switch it up as your damage output needs change or your desire to potentially reach out and touch an enemy to inflict your maneuvers on them with that whip's 10-foot range. So you can see here, ultimately, you have a huge amount of versatility. You get to deal a lot of damage. You get to roll a lot of dice, and you get to mix it up at will. Listen, a 2-handed polearm fighter is not going to have this versatility. And that's really the name of the game, is not the versatility ability, but the versatility of the character, how you play them and how you reach out. Let's talk about some of the maneuvers that are really going to come in handy with this kind of build. Lunging attack. Take it. Lunging attack. When you make a melee weapon attack on your turn, you can expend 1 superiority dice to increase the reach of that attack by 5 feet. You just get it. You burn the superiority dice, your reach on that whip goes from 10 feet to 15 feet at this point. Is it that useful? I don't know. Possibly. Again, this can be your main hand attack, so you could get the D4 plus your +3, 4, or 5 from the appropriate attribute bonus. If you hit on that 15-foot reach whip attack, though, you get to add your D8 superiority die to the attack's damage. Now that little D4 has turned into a D4 plus a D8 plus whatever potential ability bonus you had coming with it. That's a lot of damage out to 15 feet. Another maneuver I would take right off the bat when you choose your martial archetype at level 3 would be trip attack. What's trip attack going to do for you? Well, you make a weapon attack. This could be with your longsword, but I'd recommend doing it with the whip because it allows you to add your superiority die to the damage roll. So you get a D8 added onto your longsword or your whip attack. And against large, medium, or smaller creatures, they will make a strength saving throw against your maneuver's DC save to be knocked prone if they fail. Is this handy for you? Sure, if you can knock your opponent prone on the first attack, now you're at advantage on your second attack and your bonus weapon attack for your second weapon. So that's potentially your first shot knocks them down, and the other 2 attacks you're making are both at advantage. You give yourself advantage. Furthermore, depending on the turn order, you may have other allies that are going to get attacks on that prone target before the creature's turn comes up and has a chance to recover from the prone condition by standing up. So if the turn order works in your favor, you could give advantage to attack rolls on a single target to all of your allies. Now, with something like reach, you could use that whip attack for your main hand attack and try and take a trip attack against more than one target. That's right, you could use attack 1 and attack 2 and possibly attack 3 if you're high enough level with your fighter to trip multiple enemies, putting them all on the ground. Granted, you have a limited number of superiority dice, but when it's a fight's going against you, it may be worth trying to knock down 1, 2, or even 3 enemies. Bear in mind, the prone condition gives that creature disadvantage on all of its attack rolls. So if you knock down 2 or 3 enemies in a single round, burning up the superiority die, then they're at disadvantage to attack your foes until they get back on their feet. And all attacks against that creature have advantage. All attacks against those creatures are going to have advantage, provided your allies and you are within 5 feet. That's why you're going to have that longsword. The third maneuver I'd take right off the bat would be menacing attack. Listen, if you hit a creature, you get to add a superiority die and add that damage to the attack roll. But on top of that, you're going to force the target to make a wisdom saving throw, again at your very nice maneuver DC save. If it fails that save, it is frightened of you until the end of your next turn. Let's talk about what frightened does. A frightened creature has disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls while the source of its fear is within line of sight. Well, you frightened it from melee to range 5 to 10 feet. That means you're in line of sight for quite a while. Another nice touch, a creature can't willingly move any closer to the source of its fear. That's you. Think of this like a lion tamer with its whip. If you can inflict the frightened condition on a target that's 10 feet away with your 10-foot reach on your whip, they can't come at you, and you can just make attack after attack. If it's a single target you're focusing down on, you can keep them away from you for turn after turn, hitting them with attacks from your main hand. If you're using 2 whips, you could be making 2, 3, 4 attacks per turn on a frighten target that can't get any closer to you. Even if they're making ranged attacks against you, they're going to be at disadvantage because they're frightened of you. So if you're thinking of, say, like an arena or gladiatorial fight, and you go in there with this character build with a whip in each hand, it's one-on-one, that creature is never going to get close to you. If you're judicious, if you're conservative with the output and expenditure of your superiority dice, and you keep that creature frightened as long as possible, you're going to be able to make whip attack after whip attack, possibly for 2, 3, or 4 rounds, with that creature not being able to approach you or being able to even make an attack against you with anything but disadvantage. Bear in mind, with that 10-foot reach, you can make an attack on an enemy and stay out of their 5-foot threat range. So you don't need to take a disengage. You can walk up to them, attack with whip from 10 feet away, and simply walk away. And when you're using 3 or 4 attacks with those whips, 1 in each hand, you can deal a lot of damage and avoid almost all threat to yourself. It's a guaranteed win. You're going up against a fighter that's using 2-weapon fighting for 2, 3, 4th round of combat. The game's over, and your fighter may never even be hit. This gives your fighter a character ability that targets wisdom and targets strength. Let's be really honest. Many of the enemies you're going to face are not going to be both strong and wise. One of those two things, if you're smart about it, you're going to be able to find a vulnerability. On top of which, at level 7, a Battle Master fighter is going to get the Know Your Enemy capability, which allows you to observe an opponent for a minute or so and then know things like, hey, is their constitution, their strength score higher than mine? And that would allow you to potentially know if your tripping attack is going to have a good chance of working on a strong or weak target. Keep in mind you recover all your superiority dice after a short or long rest. Talk to your DM, make sure you're getting those short rests, and you should be using your superiority dice up in almost every combat. So that's about it. That's a general idea of how to build a fighter that can utilize a whip, gets a lot of attacks. It's not a character that's optimized for damage, it's a character that's optimized to be versatile. They're both forms of optimization. But I'll tell you what, you run around with that Battle Master fighter making 3 attacks by 5th level, and by the time you reach the highest tier of play, 5 attacks every turn. That's without expending any superiority dice. By the way, the damage on those superiority dice go up as you level, as well as the number of them that you can get. By the time you hit the final tiers of play, you're going to have access to darn near every single maneuver available out of the player's handbook. I think that about wraps it up. I hope that helps people understand how a whip is a unique weapon that allows for massive opportunities to attack, massive opportunities to inflict enemies with the character's various touch abilities, we'll call them, or melee range abilities. And there's really no other item in the game that's going to allow you to do what the whip can do. So if you listened, I appreciate it. Good luck to you.